Dear reader, this is another voice that time has almost silenced. A forgotten letter written by those who remain, so that the story of those who left does not fade away. Snow fell like ash over the city of Leningrad, muting the sound of everything but hunger. The streets were a quiet graveyard, a world of broken windows, skeletal trees, and bodies sleeping under sheets of frost. In the ruins of an old apartment, a soldier sat against the wall, his rifle laid aside, his hands stiff from cold and fear. He had begun writing again, not to report or confess, but to remember. His name was Sergei Antonov, 24 years old, a mechanic before the war. What remained of his unit had been ordered to hold a building that no longer had walls, surrounded by the dead and the dying. Each morning, he recorded their names in a small notebook, not for command, not for history, but so that no one here would vanish completely. When the thaw comes, he wrote once, they'll all flow into the Neva like petals. He had seen too much to pray and too little to give up. But when he turned the final page of his notebook, he hesitated, unsure whether to write another name or his own. And so, dear reader, one wonders, what happens when the living become the keepers of the dead and the line between memory and survival begins to blur? I am Anya Petrovna, once a nurse at the military hospital number 14 on Nevsky Prospect. Sergei was my patient for 3 days in February of 1942, 3 days before he was sent back into the front line of the siege. He left behind a small brown notebook, the kind used by schoolboys, bound with a piece of string. I kept it in my drawer through all the bombings, through the winter of bark soup and candle wax. Inside, there were no battles described, only the stillness after them. He wrote as if the city itself were listening, as if the snow and silence were the only things that could understand. I read his words each night when the hunger made me delirious, and I could almost hear him whispering them aloud. Part 1. The House of the Dead, 700 words. The building where Sergei had been stationed was once a tenement, 3 stories high, with blue shutters and a courtyard where, before the war, children played marbles and old women scolded stray cats. Now the windows were hollow eyes, staring at the grey sky. The air inside was heavy with the odor of gunpowder, wet plaster, and something darker, a sweetness that no one spoke of. Sergei described the silence of the place. Even the wind moves carefully, he wrote. The city had fallen into a rhythm of death, the thud of distant shells, the crack of ice shifting on the Neva, and the whisper of cloth as someone dragged another body into the hall. The soldiers no longer flinched at the sight. They had no strength for grief. Inside that tenement, they slept beside the dead because there was no space to move them. Blankets and uniforms covered the still forms, turning the room into a strange mosaic of the living and the gone. We keep them near, Sergei wrote, because they do not abandon us. He sometimes joked that the dead were better guards than the living. They did not run, did not panic, and did not need food. At night they would light small fires from chair legs and torn books. The flames made the frost on the walls glisten like stars. Sergei often stared into that trembling light and imagined his home, his mother's kitchen in Yaroslavl, the warmth of bread, the smell of oil and smoke from his workbench. But the memory only deepened the hunger. When you are starving, he wrote, even the past becomes edible. One entry spoke of the woman who lived downstairs, an elderly teacher who refused to leave her apartment. She still sat at her table each day, pencil in hand, correcting old essays by candlelight. When Sergei checked on her, she smiled faintly and said, "We must keep learning, even now." Later that night, when the shelling began again, he saw her window still glowing with a small, steady flame. "She is teaching the silence," he wrote. There were other small things that haunted him. A child's wooden horse frozen in the stairwell, its paint chipped, but its wheels still intact, a shoe with no foot inside, a single mitten hanging on a broken railing. Each thing, Sergei noted, is waiting for someone who will never return. Sometimes, when the cold became unbearable, he wrapped himself in his greatcoat and read the names he had written in the notebook, the names of his comrades, of civilians, of the nameless frozen in the street. He said them softly as if calling them to dinner. I read them, he explained, so that they know they are still counted among the living. By February, frost covered even the corpses in the rooms, turning them into pale statues. Sergei began to imagine they were listening. He wrote that he dreamed of them whispering, not in words, but in the soft crackle of ice. They did not ask for help. They only wanted to be remembered. The dead here are not heavy, he concluded in one passage. They are lighter than hunger, lighter than the silence, but it is we who grow heavy with their memory. He began this part with a line that has never left me. There are days when the silence weighs more than the snow. He wrote about the strange acoustics of hunger, how it amplified every distant sound until it became unbearable. A single gunshot far away echoed like thunder. A spoon dropped on the floor could make them flinch. The air here holds every sound hostage, he said, and returns it when you least expect it. The men in his group spoke little. They had lost the habit of conversation, replaced by gestures, nods, and long vacant stares. Sergei wrote that one of them, a young conscript named Yuri, began to murmur to himself each night, not delirium, but lullabies. When Sergei asked him about it, Yuri replied that he was singing to his mother so she wouldn't be lonely. 2 nights later, Yuri stopped singing. Sergei found him sitting upright, eyes open, snow gathering on his shoulders through the shattered window. He looked surprised, Sergei wrote, as if death had interrupted a thought. The survivors said nothing. They laid Yuri near the others and placed a tin plate over his face to keep the frost from marking it. Sergei wrote his name carefully in the notebook, pausing for a long time afterward before continuing. It feels wrong, he confessed, that the living must do the remembering while the dead do the resting. His notes grew fragmented after that. Hunger took away focus. Exhaustion took away language. He began to list things he missed. Sounds, smells, textures, the crunch of bread crusts, the hiss of an oil lamp, my mother's apron, the feeling of grease on my hands after fixing a car. Little by little, these lists replaced sentences. There is one entry that still makes me tremble when I read it. He wrote about the corpses in the building beginning to shift, not by any supernatural force, but because the frost was melting during a rare spell of warmth. They lean, he said, as if trying to listen to us. And then, maybe they already know what we have forgotten, how to wait without fear. A few pages later, he wrote of finding a frozen woman outside the tenement. She clutched a loaf of bread so hard that her fingers had fused to it. Sergei didn't take it, though he hadn't eaten in days. The bread belongs to her, he said. The dead must be allowed to keep what they died for. That line, simple, terrible, holy, stayed with me through every long night of the siege. The diary's rhythm began to break. Whole days were missing. Then fragments appeared again. Rats sing in the walls. The snow tastes of metal. I dreamed of a river and a bell. In one of the last entries of this section, he spoke of light. There is a moon tonight. It makes the bodies shine. The frost glitters on them like armor. They look like soldiers waiting for orders that will never come. And then a softer line beneath it. When I can no longer feel my hands, I imagine that they are already someone else's. By the final paragraph, Sergei's writing was faint, more carved than written. He no longer spoke of hunger or death, only of names. He began counting again, as though names alone could anchor him to the world. The last words on that page read, "If I do not survive, remember that I tried to name them all, because a name is the last fire that does not go out." Streets reappeared like wounds reopening. The Neva cracked open like an old scar. Sergei's diary shifted tone here. His handwriting, though still frail, carried an odd steadiness, as if the thaw had awakened something in him. "The city is breathing again," he wrote. "It hurts to hear it." He described the sound of water running through gutters filled with bones, the creak of thawing wood, the way the air itself smelled of iron and damp wool. The living emerged from their basements, blinking in the pale light, faces hollowed but defiant. One day, his unit received orders to move closer to the river. To guard what remains, the message said. But what remained was not much, only the fragile outline of a city that refused to die. Sergei carried his notebook with him, tucked beneath his coat, though its pages had begun to fuse together from dampness. He wrote sitting in stairwells, in the corners of cellars, anywhere the cold wind could not reach. He described seeing a boy searching through the debris for firewood. The child had no shoes and wore a woman's coat far too large for him. Sergei offered a piece of dried beet from his ration, but the boy shook his head and said he was looking for his sister, not food. I didn't know what to say, Sergei wrote. There are no words left for comfort, only nods and silence. When the Red Army finally broke through, some of the German lines and supplies began to trickle in. Sergei was among the soldiers brought to the hospital. That is when I first saw him, a bundle of bones and exhaustion, eyes grey and unfocused, his lips cracked from cold. He said little. Even when we spoke to him, his answers came like echoes, delayed and faint. I remember the way he held that notebook. He wouldn't let it go, even while sleeping. Once I tried to loosen it from his grasp so I could change his bandages. His hand tightened around it instantly. He whispered, "They're all in there. Don't open it until it's quiet." On his second night in the hospital, I sat beside him as he slept. His breathing was shallow, almost childlike. I noticed his notebook had fallen open to a new page, a page that wasn't like the others. The writing there was uneven, but beneath the words were small sketches, crude outlines of trees, a cup, a cat, a sun. Each one was paired with a name. At first I thought they were soldiers, but then I remembered the tenement he had written about, the one where children once played. Those were their names, the children from the building, their ghosts preserved in small drawings and fragile handwriting. They too are part of the city, he had written beside them. If no one says their names, the city will forget it was once alive. The next morning, the nurses said he hadn't woken. He was sitting upright, his hands still resting on the notebook, his expression calm, almost peaceful. The candle at his bedside had burned down to its wick, leaving a black ring of wax on the table. He had not written any farewell, no prayer, no closing words. Only one last line across the bottom of the final page, "For the city that remembers." When I read that line, I felt something tighten inside me, a grief that was not just for him, but for everyone who had been turned into silence. Sergei had written through the hunger, through the cold, through the endless nights, because to remember was the only act of rebellion left to him. And though I did not know it then, that small brown notebook would become my own way of surviving the war, my last conversation with the dead. Years later, when the war had ended and the city once again called itself Leningrad with pride instead of desperation, I still kept Sergei's notebook wrapped in linen, hidden inside a drawer beneath old uniforms and yellowed photographs. The paper had gone brittle, the ink faint as breath. Yet every winter, when the snow began to fall and the light dimmed early, I would take it out again and read by the window, tracing the words with my fingertips like a prayer. The city had changed by then. It was noisier, fuller, rebuilt with triumph carved into stone. People filled the streets again, markets reopened, laughter returned to corners where once only silence lived. Yet beneath the cobblestones, beneath every repaired wall and new tramline, I could still feel the old city breathing, wounded and watchful. I often wondered what Sergei would have thought of it, of this new life that rose from the ruins. He had written so much about memory, about names and the weight of the dead. Would he have believed in this resurrection? Or would he have seen, as I sometimes did, the traces of ghosts moving through the crowds, quiet as shadows, still waiting to be acknowledged? In 1951, when the city unveiled its great memorial to the heroes of the siege, I went. It was a cold spring morning, the kind that smells faintly of thawing metal and damp earth. The square was filled with flowers and red banners. Officials gave speeches, and children released white doves that flapped upward into the pale sky. Everyone applauded, but I felt something heavy in my chest, not pride, but a question. Who will remember those without names? I had brought Sergei's notebook with me that day, wrapped carefully in cloth. I thought of leaving it there, among the wreaths and medals, letting it become part of the city's great archive of suffering and glory. But when the time came, I couldn't do it. His handwriting felt too human, too fragile, too real to give to stone. Too many voices, I whispered, are already trapped in marble. So I took it home again. I kept it through the years of peace and reconstruction, through my marriage, through the birth of my son, through the long silences that followed every mention of the siege. Whenever someone spoke of victory, I would think instead of the building on the corner of Sadovaya Street, the one Sergei described, the house of the dead, where the walls had listened and remembered. As my son grew older, I told him stories from the war, not of battles or generals, but of small things, the sound of snow on tin roofs, the smell of candles burning in cellars, the courage it took just to wake each morning. When he was old enough to read, I showed him the notebook. He turned its pages with the same reverence I once had. "Who was he?" he asked. "A soldier," I said softly, "but also a witness." He remembered what no one else could bear to. In my final years, when my eyesight dimmed and my hands trembled too much to write, I asked my grandson to read Sergei's words aloud to me. His voice was clear and young, and it made those old lines sound new again. He stumbled over some of the names. They were foreign to him, forgotten by time. But he tried his best, repeating them until he got them right. I could hear Sergei's promise echoing through that room. A name is the last fire that does not go out. Before I died, I asked that the notebook be placed beside me, not buried, but kept. When the snow falls again, I told my grandson, read from it. Even if no one listens, read. And sometimes when I dream now, if dreaming is what remains of us, I see Sergei standing in that ruined courtyard, the notebook in his hands, the first light of Thor touching the faces of the fallen. He turns, and behind him I see the city, not the Leningrad of victory, but the one that remembered, the one that refused to forget. The siege of Leningrad devoured more than 1 million souls, yet among those numbers lived a single man who wrote so that none of them would vanish into statistics. Sergei Antonov's diary, rescued by a nurse who refused to let silence win, became not a record of war, but a testament to the stubborn endurance of memory. In his words, the dead were never gone. They were simply waiting to be spoken of again. The notebook was their resurrection, a fragile flame burning against a sea of snow. So, dear reader, if you are hearing this now, let his promise pass to you. Whisper the name of someone who should not be forgotten. Speak it softly into the air. That is how memory survives. That is how the dead remain among us, not as ghosts, but as voices kept alive by care. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. Not for numbers, but so that more forgotten voices like Sergei's may rise again from the silence.